Calgary home sales set a new July record, up 18% from last year. However, that piece of data and that headline doesn't tell the whole story. Yes, the Calgary real estate market story is all about net migration. That's the number of people that are moving to Calgary from other provinces. And that's leading to month after month of all-time price highs, even in the face of higher interest rates. Yes, that's right. With respect to net migration, Alberta is once again the place to be in Canada. But before I get into it, if you are new here, and you might be new here and not realize it because this is a new channel all about Canadian real estate news, and it's not to be confused with the old channel, which is very much going to be focused going forward on personal finance and wealth building. So if you haven't subscribed to this channel already and you're wondering why you haven't seen the Canadian real estate news that you're so used to on the other channel, it's because, well, it lives here now. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to make sure that you're still getting it. Okay, so July's sales were an absolute record for the month of July. But that being said, don't be fooled by that headline because sales year to date for Calgary are still not at the levels that they were previously. So while it was a big month for July, and that's to be expected considering that people move cross country during the summer when the kids aren't necessarily in school, the rest of the year actually hasn't been as bright. Although that being said, Calgary is definitely one of the bright spots in the country with respect to both affordability and with a market that is continuing to be positive. And I did something a little different this month. I actually pulled the graphs out of the Calgary Stats package to make them a little bit easier to digest. Now, that being said, as I always say, the Calgary Stats package is the best in the country when it comes to easily articulating the information with respect to what's going on in the real estate market. But I just thought I'd pull out some specific graphs on this one to show you exactly what's going on. So let's jump in and take a look. So let's start first with the left-hand side here. Sales numbers up 18% compared to last year. I'll get to a little bit more specifics on this in a second. New listings are up 2.2%. And one thing you have to know about Calgary's real estate market right now is just like the rest of the country, we are facing a supply shortage. And this amount of new listings, even though it seems like a big number at 3,247, is actually quite low. In fact, it is the lowest it's been since 2006, which, by the way, is the last time that Calgary saw a massive run-up in prices. And you can see that from the inventory numbers, which are down 34.8% at 3,488. And this is where the big problem is. There's not enough inventory for the amount of people who are moving into Calgary. And that months of supply number at 1.32 months, we like to see this around 3 months to have a balanced market. Well, it is very low as well, meaning that if every single house in Calgary sold and there wasn't any new listings, we'd only have 1.32 months or about 40 days worth of housing inventory before we were completely sold out. So it's imperative that we start to see new listings or we're going to see a big run up in prices in the fall. Now, you never know what's going to happen with new listings, but at this point, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a massive onslaught of new houses coming available in the Calgary market. And then moving up into the total residential price, we're looking at a 5.7% increase over last year. We're at $567,000 now. And as you can see, detached homes and semi-detached homes, which tend to be some of the higher priced properties, aren't up quite as much as those lower value homes, the townhouses and the condos, which are the easy entry points for people to enter into the market. But as those prices continue to increase, the problem is that is going to flow through to the higher end properties at some point, meaning that properties in Calgary across the board are eventually going to get significantly more expensive. And at some point, there's probably going to be more upward pressure on the higher end market. And I want to show you what this looks like from a geographical standpoint, because this chart shows the city of Calgary and it shows different areas. The west and central parts of Calgary tend to be more expensive. The east and northeast parts of Calgary tend to be a little bit more affordable. And what you can see is that the more affordable areas of the market are the areas that are seeing the biggest increases in prices. This is as new intraprovincial migrants move to the city. So in other words, people who are moving from other provinces. And yes, guess what? There's one specific province that many of them are moving from. And I'll get to that in a second. Now, the next chart I want to show you just shows the months of supply and historical price changes. As you can see, the months of supply is continuing to go down and down and down. And the trend line is continuing to go down, which means we are facing the same supply problems as many other cities in Canada. And when you start to have low supply, you start to see prices increase. And the momentum towards rising prices is starting to increase, meaning the velocity of price increases going into the fall is probably going to go up quite significantly. Now, here's where it starts to get interesting. This is the total sales for July. This is just the month of July going back to 2009. Now, this doesn't have the data going all the way back to 2006, but as you can see, the sales numbers for July are considerably higher than any other July on record. And if you go one step further and you take a look at the total inventory, the total inventory numbers are also significantly lower than they've been compared to any other July in recent history. And if you're to go back and look to 2006, which, like I said earlier, is the last time Calgary real estate prices went up significantly, well, the inventory levels for July are pretty comparable to back then. And this is having a pretty big effect on the lower end of the market, so the market that is most affordable. As you can see from this chart, the 200,000 to 300,000 and the 300 to 400,000 areas of the market are experiencing the greatest number of sales, and that's no surprise as people look towards affordability. Now, the $700,000 to $1 million area looks like it's in the same sort of category, but keep in mind that this is a $300,000 price range compared to $100,000 price ranges. So if you're to break these out, when you look at the $700,000, $800,000, and $900,000 price ranges, the numbers would be quite insignificant. In fact, what you would probably see is a trend line that continues down all the way to $1 million. And this is where we get into the reason why Calgary's market is so strong, and that is intra-provincial migration. Now, as you can see from this chart, net migration in Ontario is by far the biggest. But the reason for this is because they have the single biggest amount of new immigrants to Canada. So the Ontario numbers on this graph do not represent intra-provincial migration, they represent new immigrants to the country. And what I'll show you in a second is that people who already live in Ontario are actually leaving at a greater rate than they are coming. So if we take a look at the types of migration for Ontario, what you can see is that there is a lot of international migration, that is the blue line, and that is leading to a pretty significant amount of total migration. But if you look at inter-provincial migration, Ontario is actually losing a significant amount of people to the rest of Canada. And guess where a lot of them are going? Yes, it's Alberta. Because if you look at the total migration numbers for Alberta, they're made up partially of international, but a lot is interprovincial. And again, this is largely people who are moving from Ontario and some from BC looking for more affordability in housing. And this is ultimately what's putting upward pressure on the Calgary real estate market, is the significant amount of people who are moving to Calgary looking for that affordability. You see it in the types of properties that are being sold, you see it in the areas that are being bought in, and you see it in the interprovincial migration numbers. And what that tells us from an economics perspective is that Calgary, by the looks of it, is going to continue to have a fairly strong real estate market going into the fall. Which means if you're sitting on the fence waiting for Calgary real estate prices to fall, don't expect them to come down because of higher interest rates. What you're actually waiting for is the next oil crash, and there's no way of predicting exactly when that will happen. Oh, and by the way, if you're looking to buy an investment property in Calgary because you see these numbers pointing to up, 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 well, it could be a bad idea when 2 or 3 years down the road, that inevitable oil crash happens and you're left holding a property that's worth significantly less because Calgary, by nature, is a cyclical economy. And as a result, the housing market is cyclical as well. And by the way, if you want to know more about what's going on in the Canadian real estate market and with Canadian mortgage rates, make sure you check out one of these videos here, and specifically on this one that talks about the crash that already happened. And I'll give you a hint, if you blinked, you missed it.